Hey, what's up, and welcome to another episode of Sneak Up. It's Pedestrian's podcast dedicated to all things art, music, dance, and all-around culture, sponsored by Platypus Shoes. My name is Jack, and I'm your host and your avatar for all the amazing conversations that we've been having here on the show. On today's episode, I'm joined by Sweden's own Tove Lo. She's down under for Spotify's next season of Front Left gigs, fresh off the back of her latest album, Sunshine Kitty, which has just come out. And she joins me right now. Tove, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So you're here down under for Front Left, which is a Spotify gig named after their playlist of the same name. Mm-hmm. Is Front Left your go-to spot at a gig?
You're like talking about, like, where do we meet? It's like, left of, like, front of house, like, you know, stage left or stage right. So I usually go front of house, like kind of where the soundboard is. It kind of depends on who I'm going to see, but yeah, I would say usually around front of house is where I park out.
Is that because you just like to be right in the middle?
I do, yeah. Like to be in the middle, but then you're like, you kind of can still, there's still space to dance, but you can like hear and see and feel the full show, you know?
Yeah, I get that. What else are you doing while you're in town?
But I don't know, I went running this morning, ran to the Opera House, it was very beautiful. Nice. And then we've gone to some really good dinners. Went to Mr. Wong's, which is really nice.
Cool. Shoutouts.
Shoutouts. Yeah. It was nice actually. They gave us a ride back in a Rolls Royce, which I've never been in a Rolls Royce before, so that was very unexpected and great.
Whoa! Like the Mr. Wong's Rolls Royce.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no idea they owned a Rolls Royce.
Me neither. We were like, are we gonna pay for this? Like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, no, it's on us. We're taking you back. I'm like, nice.
Sure.
Okay, sure. I'm not going to say no.
No way. Other gigs that you've been involved in recently, you were recently with NME's Girls to the Front series, which was all about championing women and non-binary artists. Why do you feel events like that are so important?
I think, the dream is that, one day will be one big community, but until there's full equality, there needs to be a support system for like LGBTQ community, for women in industries where they've been kind of pushed out of. And I think I see a big difference in like the last 5 years since I became, an official artist, that like I don't know, I see a lot of women supporting each other, shouting each other out, like collaborating on music, and like there's not as much rivalry. It's more like, we're stronger together. And I think that really helps. And it like, if you see, if you highlight women in the industry, it's going to inspire other girls and women to be a part of it. And I think that's really important to make it more of an equal place.
For sure. Mm-hmm. There's been a really open conversation around bisexuality in the last few years, which you've also explored in your music. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's had any major impact on the public's view of you as a person?
It's had an impact for like why certain people maybe they won't choose to book me for something, or like the crazy thing is like now it feels like if you talk about your sexuality, you're being political, and I think that's kind of like. You wouldn't say that if I was just straight. If I could be like, I'm a straight woman, or something, she's so political,
Yeah.
And that bothers me because I feel like that shouldn't be. I just want it to be. It's something that's natural for me, so it shouldn't be seen always as a statement. It should just be taken with like, cool, okay, that's you, And I think obviously there is this like wave now of like it's popular to support. This community, and I think it's taken advantage of a little bit. But then again, I'm like, okay, but all the support will also mean that it's seen and like reaches people that normally would just write it off and like be, I'm against it. That might make them a little bit more accepting. So I don't know. I'm just kind of talking as I'm thinking here.
We all are, really.
Yeah.
I guess it's sort of about normalizing it when it isn't normal. I love that. I think a lot of my fans really, it's helped a lot of my fans that I've like
about me being open about my sexuality, and that I love. And I hope that soon it can just be, not seen as a statement, but something that's just, my natural being.
For sure.
Yeah.
In sort of that conversation around sexuality within music, a lot of the time, I guess a word you could use is like people being explicit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's important for women, non-binary and gender non-conforming people to be explicit in discussing their sexuality, to normalize it, or?
I feel like it's only seen explicit because you're talking about like when you're talking about sex, or like same-sex love. It's like me just being quite blunt in my lyrics in general is, which I think is what you mean by explicit, like just singing openly about sex and like using profanity and stuff.
Profanity,
like like in Sweden we don't censor at all. Like you'll hear fuck on the radio all day.
Mm-hmm.
So to me it took a long time for me to like understand that this is like a word, like words that are offensive, but then I'm like, to me it's like it's words that you use to enhance emotions, and it can mean very different things depending on how you say them. This isn't answering your question at all, I'm realizing, but I'm just talking about
it's all part of the same
now.
thing. Yeah.
And I feel like, the way how I kind of use like bitch in Glad He's Gone. I sing about like the dude, like he's a bitch with some expectations, and then I say, bitch, I love you. And it's kind of showing that, the intention of the word matters more than the word. Like in some ways, of course, there are obvious words that you stay away from, but like me using certain words to like enhance another feeling, or like, there's a positive way to use the word bitch, and there's a negative way, and like it's in the power of the person using it. And I think that is kind of something that for me is why I think all this censoring sometimes really like, can cripple the emotion of a song, because like you have to sort of tone it down to not offend someone who's just decided that this word is a bad word. If that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I've seen you say before that you felt as though you needed to be downcast to write, but your most recent album, Sunshine Kitty, is comparatively more generally upbeat and brighter. What changed in your writing process or your life that led to that?
I think when I set out to do like this, Queen of the Clouds, my first album. I mean, it's my fourth album in 5 years. Queen of the Clouds was, you have your whole life to write your first record. And when I set up this creative goal with Ladywood and Blue Lips, so like I'm going to make, a double album. I'm going to make short films to all of it. I was going through some shit, and so I was working through all that while I was, creating all this stuff. And when I was done, I felt like, I came out the other side, like I did it, and it was kind of this sort of, I felt like I had a clean slate in a way, and I think I finally also had like a second to take in everything that's happened in the last 5 years, that I've been able to get used to what this life means, like finally gone to a place where like relationships in my life are back in a good place, because it kind of doesn't matter how like much you think that like, it's going to stay the same with people around you. It changes, you don't see them as often. Some people really can't handle, being close to someone doing this and being with someone who's in the spotlight. And yeah, so I think there was like a combination of me just being in a common place in my life. I've been in a really good relationship for a couple of years, and been living in the sunshine in LA. And yeah, I just felt, but mainly it was like creatively, I felt like I had a clean slate, and that I could just like, okay, I don't know what's next for me. I'm just going to play around in the studio and see what happens. And so I think it just feels more playful because of that in a way.
The sunshine would help, I imagine.
Yeah. It does. More than I want to admit. Yeah.
I read that in your youth you struggled with anxiety and with depression. What would you say to fans of your music that might be experiencing similar feelings?
I think, well, it's difficult because, like, obviously it's a very personal experience. So it's like how it felt for me was, what helped me was to have an outlet. Like, obviously the music and like the creativeness is really what worked for me. So I think if there's anything that like you can find that is your outlet for your emotions, because I feel holding it in and pushing it down never works. And I think a lot of the time you kind of get the advice of like, focus on the positive and pick yourself back up. But like when you're depressed and when you're down, there isn't anything positive to grasp. Everything has that gray, wet blanket over it. So I think it's like kind of accepting that you're feeling these feelings and then telling someone close to you that you trust, I think is really important. To kind of admit to the emotions, I think helps. Is like the first step to kind of get past them.
In moving on to something a bit more, I don't know, theoretical, I guess, in like a conservative idea of what a good role model is, you might not fit into that mold.
No.
But what do you think makes a good role model?
It's like this. I think all humans have all sides to them. Like there isn't just like this one way that you are and that you stick to, and people love putting you in folds and like this is how you are and this is what you're about. And then it frustrates you and there's like more sides in a way. Does that make sense? You know how it's kind of like, so it's all about, trying to find who you identify with and where you see yourself, like, or like where you see yourself, where you want to be. And I just think a lot of the time role models are people that are like, these kind of law-abiding citizens who, are nice and polite and are, behaves well and never makes mistakes and, is always a good person, never gets angry, like is always poised and whatever that word means. Like, I think for me, it's just kind of like, I'm just going to be, I never said I was a role model, but I'm always honest. And like, I'm honest what I think and how I feel. And I'm not the most, well-read person, but I know my like core values. And sometimes I fuck up. And it's like this. I think mainly when we talk about role models, if someone is like seen as a party girl, especially if it's, a woman, if it's a party girl, you can't look up to her because she's bad news, bad influence. And I just think that I can be a party girl and still be deep and have, I don't know, have something to say and be smart and like be really good at my craft as a songwriter without, instead of just, it's so easy to, I think really often people just write women off as soon as they do anything that's like seen as a bad girl move. And yeah, this is kind of old and boring.
True that.
Yeah.
Pop music is, for many, music which is really structured, really highly produced. The sound is really controlled. But nowadays, I think we're seeing more artists sort of record and perform in a way that's much more gritty. It's much more unrestrained. Why do you think that shift is happening now in 2019?
Well, first of all, it's easier to make music. There's so many like kind of cool, like, I don't know, I find that it's like, all this, you make everything on a laptop now, just kind of straight, and you don't need a lot of gear. So you can kind of just like set up and do it. And I think there's always like a counter reaction when something's been too much one way for a long time. There's always that, like, we get sick of hearing the same thing. We need something to kind of shake it up a little bit. So I think it's like a natural sway to that. And I think it's always, perfection is just boring. So after a while, when things have been sounding too polished, there's always going to be like a counterpunch to that.
Yeah, definitely. You recently worked with Kylie Minogue. What did you learn from someone who's been in the pop game for basically forever?
Oh, it's amazing to see that, she's an icon, and she is so charming and lovely and kind and, you know, professional, passionate about music. And I think when you're at that level, you can kind of choose to be however you want. And it's kind of amazing to see someone, you know, choosing that way.
Yeah. I can't imagine Kylie Minogue being anything but any
No.
of those things. And I'm so glad that you said that.
No, fully.
Oh my God, what a relief. Collaboration seems to be a really big part of what you do. Aside from Kylie, you've worked with Lorde and Nick Jonas. Do you prefer working solo or with a team?
I really like working with a team. I love having people around me. I'm kind of like a social puppy. I always like tour with, you know, I'm very tight with my touring family. I'm very tight with the people I write with. And I think, yeah, it's kind of like the doing it all yourself has never really worked for me. Like I can definitely, you know, come up and like with a song and write a song that I like complete, but then I want to take it to someone to like finish the production or like do something to kind of get more influences in there than just my own. I think I grow more as a songwriter from working with other people. It really like, because you just get inspired more. Yeah.
Speaking of inspired, we've got this section on the show which is called Shoutouts. So it's basically like a time where you can let us know someone that you think is doing some really amazing things. It could be in music, in any other sort of art form. So is there anyone that you really want to shout out?
I want to shout out, I'm like, let me get my list of the 100.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to spring that on you.
No. Well, okay. I want to first of all shout out my some of my like, you know, my family in LA, which is the Broods, who I think I was a massive fan before I even became friends with them.
For sure.
And then they're the most lovely people in the world.
I interviewed them recently.
Oh,
they
you did?
were amazing.
Yeah. They're just like, you know, Caleb has been my roommate for a while in LA.
Cool. Oh, no way.
And George and they're just like, we just click as people. And then I think they're some of the most amazing songwriters that I've worked with, and just incredible musicians. And I think their last album, Don't Feed the Pop Monster, is amazing. And then I also want to shout out Harley Jones, who designed Sunshine Kitty. He's this amazing. Cool. I got this done in Melbourne a couple of days ago, so it's very crisp.
Yeah, is it itchy yet?
Not really. I had that second skin thing put on, which heals it way quicker. I've
never used that.
But so he's the one that designed Sunshine Kitty. And he's an amazing tattoo artist, and just has this fascinating story. Like his parents are illustrators, and like he just got really, he's really good, just amazing illustrator, and just like all the tattoos he's done I just love. It's like this kind of dreamy cartoon world that is beautiful. So shout out, Harley.
Yay, cool. Now there's another section on the show that we do. You're wearing a pair of Vans here. Is that your usual go-to? They're pretty bright.
My usual go-to is actually I have this pair of like glittery Converse that are like blue, red, and pink and sparkle. And every time I put heels on, and then I'm like, no, and I just switch to those instead. But yeah, kind of like bright sneakers. I really
feel
enjoy.
like it fits with the Sunshine Kitty look as well. Yeah. And so Tove, finally, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Well, I'm gonna tour this album like crazy. And make some more videos. And what else am I doing? Yeah, I think just keep creating, putting out music, and touring in the world.
Just keeping busy, staying in the sun.
Yeah.
Cool, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Tove. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.